25 million lives. 25 million people in less than half a century were dragged through hell as bombs rained upon them throughout the Cold War. Yet, what if the clash between these two behemoths never occurred or was even delayed? Imagine a world where the Cold War never occurred after the Second World War. A world where politics is branched off from what we know today. What if the Soviet Union and the United States of America began to cooperate after the Second World War? What if a new political party started dominating American domestic policy, allowing the hatred towards communism to never occur as there was in our world? October 24th, 1929. Time stood still as the clock struck at 11 a.m. This was the day that the Wall Street stock market collapsed. As the hours pursued, more and more people started selling their stocks as their lives depended on it. The constant expansion of consumerist goods without any end in sight caused a massive economic bubble to form. The result? Total economic devastation. Economic devastation across the entirety of the globe. However, time doesn't stand still for anybody. It moves on unimpeded, unstoppable, not caring for humanity at all. Only 2 years after the Great Depression, the president, Herbert Hoover, was found dead in the White House. The cause was unknown, but some theorized that he had been murdered, possibly due to the actions of a foreign agent. However, detectives were unable to find any signs of murder, and an autopsy later claimed the cause of death was a heart attack. Even after he was examined in the morgue, doctors could not make a different diagnosis besides the heart attack. The vice president, Charles Curtis, took up the mantle of president, but even he was unable to halt the total economic collapse of the United States. In desperation, people search for hope. For hope is the last thing people go to. One man, John Steinbeck, author and intellectual, stepped up to become that hope for the people, and pulled the economy of the USA out of the gutter and onto the world stage once more. Having moved to San Francisco after his father's company had gone bankrupt, he came into contact with a small political party, calling themselves Social Progressivists. He soon found himself becoming the party's leader, taking it a step further and renamed the organization to the Neo-Progressive Party, also known as the NP. Using his skills as an author, he wrote a book on the decay of the American political and economic structure, which immediately gained massive traction nationwide. People who had been pushed to despair began to see the light at the end of the tunnel. John Steinbeck promised that his party would end this horrible depression encompassing the United States, and that he would save and recreate a new American destiny. Going ahead at full force, the Neo-Progressives Party utilized everything in their power to secure more votes throughout the USA, their main campaign focus being to end the unfair and failed system of the US economy and introducing new reforms by acting upon a centralization of authority finances, harsher tariffs, and lastly, modifying the FDR solution of 1934 to the southern states instead of the northern ones. Through the creation of new markets and introducing new incentive mechanics, they promised the people of the USA that they would reinvigorate the American economy and, as luck would have it, in 1936, John Steinbeck secured the presidency. Yet, while the USA tried to recover from the aftershocks of the Great Depression, a nation across the Atlantic was gearing up for war. Tanks in the thousands rolled off the production line, and men in the hundreds of thousands marched across the Rhine. Germany was ready to manifest their own destiny. This time, however, the American giant is no longer a slumbering one, but a fully functioning war machine. The NP party took a hard stance against fascists and the German regime. Anti-fascist propaganda prevailed throughout the nation. Time continued to march on, and by then, 1940 was around the corner, marking the first tribulation of the NP party. But not all was good in the U.S. A political crisis rocked the nation, with one side represented by the Republican Party wanting to stay out of the war, while the NP-Democrat coalition advocated for direct intervention. Yet, like before, the U.S. weathers the crisis and an agreement is reached, resulting in the American declaration of war against the Japanese Empire, citing illegitimate occupation of Asian-Pacific nations as their reason. With the war machine already operating at full force, the USA was ready. Ships in the hundreds sailed across the Pacific Ocean to meet the Japanese Imperial Navy head-on. Both the Americans and Japanese took massive losses. However, in the end, it was the Americans who ended up pushing back the Japanese. And finally, in January 1943, the USA successfully liberated the Philippines, Indonesia, and Australia. Having obliterated most of the Japanese Imperial Navy, the United States turned its attention to Europe. By December 1943, the US mobilized 2 million men to cross the Atlantic and prepare for a land invasion through Great Britain into Britain and Normandy. For the next 2 months, the Atlantic Wall was constantly battered by bombers. Finally, on February 27, the USA set foot on the European mainland in what would later be known as D-Day. Again, the U.S. war machine walked forward unhindered, pushing back the German troops together with its allies. The war that shook the world ended on December 7th, 1944, as Russian and Allied troops jointly occupied Berlin. New World Order. From the ashes of Europe, a new world order had arisen. Victorious nations met together in Copenhagen, Denmark, to discuss the aftermath of the war. The end result is the Treaty of Copenhagen, signed between all members involved in the war. The Treaty of Copenhagen stipulates the following things. Article 1. Eastern Europe will come under the Soviet sphere of influence. Germany will be partitioned into both East and West. Article 2. Scandinavian countries remained neutral. Abbenrad City in Denmark will remain in West Germany. Article 3. Greece remained neutral, and its core islands in the Mediterranean shall be returned. Article 4. The Balkan Partition. Southern Montenegro, Bosnia, Western Croatia, and Slovenia will go into the Western sphere of influence, whereas Northern Croatia, Serbia, Macedonia, and Northern Montenegro will go into the Soviet Pact. Article 5. Austria shall remain occupied by Allied and Soviet forces until a partition can be agreed upon. Although a new order had arisen, some men were not meant to see it. On July 7, 1946, Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin was found dead in his office. Official sources have stated it was due to heart failure. However, some claim it was done by an unknown assailant, either domestic or foreign. The funeral of Chairman Stalin took place 4 days later. This also marked the start of mass chaos. Power struggle erupted throughout the Soviet Union. It wasn't until Beria stepped in and halted the struggle until the next general election. Almost a year passed, and finally, in 1947, after several so-called discussions, a new chairman was elected. His name? George Maximilianovich Malenkov. A new dawn emerged from the Soviet Union, and with it, a new leader. Malenkov soon recognized the doctrine America was following. Having to adjust accordingly, Malenkov proposes to come together and sign a cooperation agreement. Although there was political infighting on the American side, they too came to an agreement, sending out a delegation to the USSR. On January 1949, the USA and USSR met in Vilnius to discuss the feasibility of the cooperation agreement. Through heated debate and multiple concessions on both sides, a final agreement was reached, which entails the following. 1. A free trade union will be created, encompassing both the Soviet and American spheres of influence. 2. The USSR will be allowed to keep its Eastern European nations under its sphere of influence. However, the free trade agreement will have to be followed. 3. Germany will adopt a policy of 2 systems, 1 country, a confederation in which East and West will have their own rules and authority. 4. The United States of America will create the NADC, North Atlantic Defense Council, while the USSR will create the EDU, the Eurasian Defense Pact. For the stability of a new world, both sides have reached an agreement. The treaty was signed and enforced immediately, which from then on would be known to the world as the Red Deal, marking the beginning of a new era and the end of the old.